Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Understable Discourse, your go-to place for all the best disc golf content and news out there on the interwebs. And today, we're talking about the last event of the year. Yep, the Pro Tour Championship has come and gone, and that's a pretty much a wrap for the season. Crazy to think about, but hey, let's get into it. Now, before I get any further, I just want to say that we have reached our first subscriber goal of 100 subscribers on YouTube. Crazy to think that it's been a whole year of doing this, or a whole season of doing this, and we're at 100 people, which is really awesome. I appreciate every single one of you out there who tunes in and listens to these videos. And like I said in a post or a video a few weeks ago, we have some big content upgrades that are going to be happening during the off season. And let me tell you something, 2025 was the year where we figured out, could we do this every week? Can we put this content together? What's it going to be like? What's it going to take? And now that we know that this can be done, as this has been 34 weeks in a row, now we start making it juicy. Now we start adding on all the good, the razzmatazz, and just a lot of good things coming. But that's enough out of me. Big thank you all for the first 100 people to subscribe, and now we trot towards that next goal, 500. Let's climb that mountain together. But this past weekend we had the Pro Tour Championship that went down in Lynchburg, Virginia. It is going to be home to next year's Tour Championship as well. Unfortunately, with the courses split, we'll talk about that here in a little bit. And they added an AM side to the event, which that's where I happened to be this past weekend, out playing on the amateur side of the Pro Tour Championship. I got to play Ivy Hill. I got to play New London. It was an absolute blast. And you know what? It makes a lot of sense that they're taking the tour out there. The multiple times thing, that's a question that we have to discuss, the effectiveness of that. But it definitely makes sense they're going out there for a large event, because the Lynchburg area just has a disc golf tourism aspect. You've got the foundation guys there, and I think it's hard to argue that people don't already want to go to that area, because getting to visit the courses that the foundation guys play, but adding a Pro Tour event there at the same time, it gives people a lot of great reasons to head to Lynchburg. So, and the other thing is that Bedford County seems like it's really leaning into these events. I know that they've made they basically made the pathway to do this very, very easy for the Pro Tour. And one of the biggest issues that New London had before was like the cell phone reception and all that. Well, now, thanks to the county and the work they're doing, a cell tower has been placed, and New London might have some of the best reception of any course on the Pro Tour. So it's kind of funny how that all works. So, but speaking of New London and Ivy Hill, let's talk about the courses themselves. And one of the things that's really awesome about this event compared to other events is that the stats are kind of cool, because we get to look at just the top of the field. We're not looking at 100 MPO players or 75 FPO players, where a lot of the players at the bottom kind of muddle the statistics for the players at the top. So we get a more realistic view of how the courses play, with a better representation of the best players in the field. And that's kind of why this off season and next year we're going to be focusing on that portion of the field. So next year when we talk about events, we're going to kind of have the conversation of what the top end of the field looked like, and we're also going to compare it to how the full field goes, because we want to see how the field is playing compared to the top part of the field. How close are the rest of the players coming to competing with those at the top. So we're also going to be looking at some other different things, like maybe some rookie class stats. So we'll see how rookies do. We'll do veteran class stats. A lot of cool things like we're preparing for the off season for next year. So really excited about all that. But for this particular event, we get to look at the top players on the tour and their stats specifically. When we dive into New London, I would say that there's a lot of conversation that had happened this past week about, is New London the hardest course on the planet? And there was a lot of debate between New London and Northwood Black and the Monster over in Tampere, and the three of them being three of the hardest courses in existence. Which one's the hardest? And I think it just comes down to like your game. However, at the FPO side, I think that there was an over characterization of the difficulty, especially if you kind of watch some of the post-produced coverage over on the Jomez side. The Two Hot Geese didn't have a lot of great things to say about New London, but that being said, the top of the field averaged only 0.98 strokes over par. And to me, you know, with that and the hot round being 7 under par, this is a very fair course for the top level FPO players. You know, I think it's a layout that really just is set up so that you could excel if you're hitting your tee shots really well. And if you score poorly, it's because you're not throwing the disc well, you're not keeping it in the fairway. And for the FPO field to average better than a stroke over par, even though it is technically by 0.02, that tells me that this is actually a really good wooded course for the FPO field. Because there were no holes, other than like hole 18 averaging over a stroke over par, there were no holes that blew the stats out of the water. And it just seemed like a very fair thing. And this is actually the layout that I played for the AM side, which had its own problems. There were a lot of players on the AM side who definitely shouldn't have been playing this course. There were a lot of people who were in that sub 850 range who wanted to play the better courses. And unfortunately, New London is not, even at the FPO tee pad level, is not the kind of course I think that player that, and I want to be fair here, that lower caliber players should be playing. I think this course, if you put a full FPO field here, which we'll see next year with the Champs Cup, I think you'll see some score averages closer to like 4 and 5 strokes over par, because the bottom side of the FPO field I think is going to struggle at this course. But when you look at the top, 28 FPO players, the fact that they average better than a full stroke over par tells me this is a really fair course that challenges the top talent in FPO. And over on the MPO side, it averaged 1.41 strokes under par, making it, a harder course on tour for the top of the field. The fact that you're getting closer to even par for the best players on the MPO side, that's pretty fantastic. And as expected, someone did say, I believe I said it last time when we were previewing this event, that we thought someone would get to double digits under par. That did happen once this past weekend. And, when the best players in the world descend upon a course, no matter how hard the course is, somebody is going to pop off. It's just kind of how it goes. And New London from the longs is a brutal course. It's all about placement and speed control, and there are landing zones. And it's not just about hitting those landing zones. You need to stick to those landing zones. And getting off the fairway is very problematic at New London. But when you look at last year, New London played 1.43 strokes over par for the MPO field at Worlds. So you could say, the last iteration of New London is way harder than the new iteration of New London. You have to keep in mind that we had how many players at last year's Worlds competing on New London's course. So I think that statistic is skewed quite a bit. Having another visit to the course for Champs Cup next year will give us a real understanding of its difficulty. And then during the offseason, we're going to be looking at the courses during the year, and I'm going to be comparing the top members of the field in perspective to previous years. So we'll have a better idea of kind of how it stacked up from year to year as we get into the offseason and talk more specifically about that. Now, the other course was Ivy Hill. Not to be outdone by the difficulty of New London, it played harder for the FPO field, coming out to 1.96 strokes over par for FPO. And that makes sense because there are a lot of forced carries and distance requirements. Once again, this was the layout that I played as an amateur, and there are probably, I would say, 9 or more holes where you have to carry off the tee pad a section of water or out of bounds. And the distances are definitely not small in some cases. There are some big distances to cover. And there's a lot of places where if you just can't hit the landing zone, which is 300 plus feet away, you don't have any options. Now, if you add on top of that the wind they had to deal with, you just have a recipe for struggle on that course. And the wind that final day was very difficult to deal with indeed. Over on the MPO side, they had more success at Ivy Hill, shooting an average of 2.5 strokes under par. And that makes a lot of sense because the distance is certainly a lot less of a problem for the MPO field than it is for the FPO field. However, the wind still was an X factor to contend with that made the final round very, very difficult for the MPO field. And one of the changes at Ivy Hill that we were kind of tracking was the difference between hole 6 last year and hole 6 this year. Hole 6 last year was that basic, 350 or so foot shot downhill to the narrow green. They moved it out to a 557 foot par 3, and it was a big one. And we talked about how Ricky had kind of mentioned that it's going to be one of the most parred holes on tour, and there's going to be almost no score separation. And we would look at that after the event. So, old hole 6 from last year's World Championships had an average of 0.16 strokes over par. This year, new hole 6 had an average of 0.12 strokes over par. So, virtually the same, right? Where it isn't the same is when you talk about what the score distribution was for that hole. So last year, the way it came out to is 26% of the field birdied the hole, 42% of the field parred the hole, and 31% of the field got a bogey or worse. And there was actually an ace last year. This year, 8% of the field birdied the hole, 77% parred the hole, and 16% got a bogey or worse. And when you look at those 5 birdies that happened, of the 5, only 1 of them was from circle 1, 3 of them were from circle 2, and 1 was the throw-in from 75 feet. And to me, this is not an improvement on the old hole 6. I think the old hole 6 had decent scoring separation. I think this was just an attempt to maybe lengthen the course and have a basket in like the wooded area. So personally, I just don't think this was a good example of a change for this course. What I would like to see, and one of the things they mentioned, was that there's room back there to possibly push the basket even further back. It might make more sense to push the basket back to like 650 or 700 feet and turn this into a par 4. That might add where the first shot is you have to get up to the mouth of the woods, and then the second shot is a more technical shot into the woods where the placement of your tee shot matters, whether you're too far left or too far right, that kind of thing. I think that would be a better use of this kind of change, or they should go back to what hole 6 originally was. But enough about the courses. Let's talk about the actual rounds itself. Now, as we remember, certain players, depending on how you finish during the season, started off with different levels of stroke advantages. And so over on the MPO side, we saw a number of players, you just have an outright lead. Gannon Burr starts 8 strokes down, Calvin at 7, Macbeth and Isaac at 6, and so on and so forth down the leaderboard. Coming out into the first 2 rounds, which happened at New London, we kind of see the players getting used to the course. And getting off to a very early stretch are 4 players that I think definitely had better rounds than others. Now, across the field, there were only 4 players who finished better than 5 under par. Everyone else was below that. But you have to take into account the starting strokes here as well. So the 2 6-unders go to Ezra Robinson and Aaron Gossage. I'm not surprised by Aaron Gossage in the slightest, because New London, you have to be solid off the tee, and he is by far, I think, when it comes to strokes gained off the tee, Goose might be the best or second best player in the world. I think Gannon is technically up there as well. So, not surprised to see him here. Great round by Ezra Robinson. Kyle Klein shoots the 7 under par, and we have Calvin Heimberg shooting a blistering 9 under par to start the event off, which is kind of crazy when you think about, coming out here for the first time and shooting a 9 under par. Not only that, he was on track to be 10 under, but he got the bogey on hole 18, which isn't surprising. Hole 18 is very, very difficult. But this is New London. The race is on. Anything can happen. A couple notables is that we see, a couple players shoot over par. Actually, there's a few who shoot over par, but of those notable players, you have Gannon Burr shooting +2. Definitely not the start that he was expecting to have. You've got Nicholas Antala shooting +3, and Anthony Barella shooting +4. And oh yeah, by the way, Ricky Wysocki shooting +9. So New London definitely taking some lunches from a few players out there. Now, to his credit, and I don't want to feel like we're always making excuses for players, Gannon Buhr did have a bit of a, let's just say, stressful week. After USDGC, it's my understanding that he had to go right home. I believe his grandmother had passed, and I'm pretty sure that's the case. Obviously, my condolences. That's a terrible thing to have to deal with. I've lost grandparents before. It is devastating. And I know that he got into the Lynchburg area, I believe, on Wednesday, went and had the press conference, and then immediately came over to New London. I know that because I saw him arrive at New London at like 4:45, and that was going to be his chance to see the course. So not a lot of opportunity for practice for Gannon Buhr, which, I mean, he's the top player in the world, but it's a lot to deal with. And like I said, I'm not making excuses for the guy, but tough conditions for sure. Tough conditions for sure. Moving on to, and here's the thing real quick, even with the +2, he's still at 600 par, which is better than over half of the field currently. But going into round 2, the question would be, could Calvin do that again? And, he shoots 500 par in the second round, and we see a pair of 9s come from Ezra Robinson and Aaron Gossage, who are, closing the gap on Calvin Heimburg. Kyle Klein shoots a respectable 600 par. And then right down below that, we have Isaac Robinson shooting the 8 under, and Luke Taylor popping off for a 10 under par. Now, Luke is at this point 10 strokes off the lead, but 10 under par at New London is an incredible feat, especially considering that it was bogey free. So we have Calvin out in the lead at 21 down, Ezra at 20, and Aaron and Kyle both tied at 18 under, with Isaac kind of hot on the heels, and then a little bit of a gap between the rest of the players. As you go down the field, we're looking again for how Gannon did. Gannon shot +3 in the second round, so worse than the first round. AB improved at -1, and Ricky Wysocki decides to shoot -5 to get himself back under par for the event as a whole. But at this point, Ricky, AB, and Gannon are, they're out of the event. It's not happening for them. They're too far back of the 4 or 5 guys at the top. So we head into Ivy Hill, and this is where kind of like the weather comes into play a little bit more. We don't see the big wind happen until the 4th round, but in the 3rd round, we see the emergence of one of the players that we all kind of know plays Ivy Hill really well. Won a world championship there last year, and that's Isaac Robinson, who comes out and shoots a 12 down, along with Evan Smith shooting a 12 down, and then we have Paul McBeth and Eagle McMahon shooting 11 under par. So Isaac jumps out into the lead over Calvin, who shoots 6 under par, Gossage, who shoots 8 under par, and Ezra Robinson. So going into our final day, we've got the brothers, we've got Calvin and Goose, and these guys have kind of, I don't want to say fully separated themselves, because you could argue that like Paul McBeth being only 5 strokes back, Kyle Klein 6 strokes back, it's doable for sure. But it kind of feels like coming out of that day that Isaac Robinson has made his stamp on this course as his dominant place to play. And we had no idea that we were in for an absolutely wild round 4 at Ivy Hill. So we get the round started off, and you got players like Luke Taylor kind of popping off to a certain degree. You have Gossage, who comes out to a pretty hot start, and before too long, Goose finds himself in the lead as he shoots a total of 6 under in the front 9. And so he's off to a great start, because Calvin comes out flat, shooting 5 straight pars, followed by a birdie, a double bogey, and then a birdie. So he is even par through 9. Goose is clearly in the driver's seat, and they're proceeding through the course, and that's when we get to hole 14. Hole 14, aka Heinold's Hill. It's the hole last year where Nicolas Antala had one of the most heartbreaking rollaways we've ever seen, and they moved it up the hill this year. to try and make it a better island. They surrounded it by rocks, and they put the OB string on the outside of the rocks. Now, if you're listening to this, you've probably already heard ad nauseum from other places the details of the event. I would encourage you to go watch tour. We had an interview with Goose. We walked through everything, but I'll give you the highlights here. It starts to rain at this point. The wind is blowing, and Goose, he slips on the tee-pad. And the drive makes it pretty far, but it goes out of bounds. And so now he's kind of sitting at that 330 to 350 mark and decides to assess his lie, take his line back, and it's very clear on coverage that he's taking a long time. And then it's even longer. And then it's even longer. He throws his third shot at this point because of the OB stroke, and the disc hits the ground somewhere near the base of the rocks of this island. And he gets the red flag, meaning that his disc landed OB, of course. And then he has the marshal in the card walk up behind him and issue him a time violation, or just a warning, and proceeds to walk towards the green. Ezra Robinson throws his off the rock. Isaac tries to throw himself out of bounds twice, but doesn't. Gets the luckiest breaks ever to get back in bounds. Calvin is up on the island putting for birdie. And so they start walking up, and Ezra and Goose, they're headed towards like the drop zone area, and that's when the spotter informs them that, oh, no. Ezra crossed the OB line on the outside of the rocks, but Goose never even hit the rocks. So he has to go back to where he was last in bounds. And that started a bit of a firestorm of questions. Why was this spotter making this decision for the card when the whole card thought that it would hit the rocks? Turns out this spotter is a certified official, and his say goes on this hole. Wasn't really, in my estimation, in a fantastic position to make this call. Had an AirPod in one of his ears, which hurts the senses a bit. And a number of people polled on the ground said that it hit the rock. They audibly heard it hit the rock. Even Nate Perkins himself reported it hit the rock when describing the flight of the disc. And say what you want about the situation, but it definitely felt like Goose hit the rock there. But needless to say, he moves back to the fairway, throws it up deep at the basket, goes up, misses the putt, taps in for a triple bogey on hole 14. Now at this point, the event is still not over. Goose is very much still in the event. He is, I believe at this point, he may be, because Calvin misses his putt and takes the par. Does not capitalize on the situation as much as he could have. So I believe at this point, Goose is still either tied for the lead or in the lead. I apologize, I don't have that. I have my notes in front of me, but I don't have that written down. And they head to hole 15, which we all know is like Calvin's best hole ever. Calvin throws the drive of a lifetime. He ends up getting an eagle on the hole. Goose and Isaac take the birdies, and we make it to hole 16, where is the next set of events. Hole 16, Calvin throws one of the longest drives I think we've seen all event long, carries the OB section in the middle and lands safe on the other side, and takes the only single birdie that hole 17 surrenders all weekend. Calvin is just him. And in the process of trying to get the par, both Goose and Isaac double bogey the hole. And so now Calvin finds himself, with a multi-stroke lead going into hole 17. He steps up, lands it on the island, catches the birdie putt. Goose lands it on the island, misses the putt. Isaac takes a bogey. At this point, it's Calvin's game, and hole 18 is not the kind of hole where you gain or lose a lot of strokes on people. Calvin plays it perfectly to par. Pro Tour champion, Calvin Heimberg. Goose had an opportunity and just could not get it done. So crazy finish for the MPO field. Not the greatest round by Ezra as he falls off into tied for 4th place, but you got Calvin coming in first, Goose in second, tied for second with Isaac Robinson, and Luke Taylor and Ezra Robinson tied for 4th. All the way down the leaderboard, you've got, unfortunately, Gannonburg coming up with a +1 in the final round to finish 10 under par. 23 strokes back of Calvin Heimberg. And one of the more surprising finishes, Adam Hammes coming in last place for the event. I mean, we know he has a low floor, but the man has an incredible ceiling. So, crazy finish for the MPO field. Bonkers. Hopping over to the FPO side of the aisle, we see some really incredible play going on in the first 2 rounds. And both, so after round 1, and a 7-down performance from Lisa Fakis, who completely eliminated her even start deficit, climbed herself onto lead card next to Silva, Owen, and Holland, who all after their first round found themselves at 9 under par. So we're getting that battle that we expect. Missy Gannon shoots a +5, knocking herself significantly down the leaderboard. And Missy she had a rough day. Couldn't really get it going. Had a very, very rocky start. Being 4 over through 4 holes is just not the way you want to get going at New London, which I feel like if you have a bad start at New London, it tends to just keep kicking you down. Moving into round 2, we see Silva have a 7-down performance, extending her lead out to 6 strokes over Holland, who shoots 1 down. Missy claws back into the field with a 7 under par performance, which is, I mean, very typical of FPO, where you can have these violent swings and score. But Silva, once again, kind of giving herself the setup that she needs to win this event. They head over to Ivy Hill, and I think this is kind of where you see Silva's distance struggle a little bit as she shoots a 2 over par, surrendering strokes to the field, and now her lead only being cut to 2 strokes over Paige Pierce and Holland Handley, tied at 12 under. And surprise, surprise, I told you, Evelina Salonen at 8 under par. I said Evelina would be the lowest player on the list that I could see coming up and making some waves. Here she is. Going into round 4, the windiest of all the rounds, we again see Silva Saarinen struggle with this course and the distance, shooting another over par round, knocking herself down the leaderboard and finishing in 3rd at 11 under par. A battle ensues between Paige Pierce and Holland Handley, but unfortunately for Paige Pierce, she would hit the stretch of holes 11 through 13 where she would take 3 bogeys in a row, and that would kind of, well, knock her out of contention a bit. And Holland Handley pretty convincingly takes down the win at 19 under par with a 7 under finish at the event. And I believe shooting the hot round at Ivy Hill in the final and taking home the big check and adding more confusion to the Player of the Year conversation for the FPO. You know, I still think that Missy Gannon has won this award, but the whole "what have you done for me lately" crowd, who knows? They could be looking at this finish from Holland and saying maybe some Holland votes are going to be thrown out there. But, you know, looking at this event, stepping back from it, I think there are some things they have to really consider for 2026, because remember, the Champs Cup is going to be held at New London, all 4 rounds at New London, which means that they can't use New London for the Pro Tour Championship, which is going to be 4 rounds at Ivy Hill. So having to split these courses apart, I think Champs Cup is going to be just fine, because we love hardwooded courses for the Champions Cup. New London is going to be able to deliver just that. It's going to look immaculate. It's going to be a great time. Ivy Hill for 4 rounds is going to, we're going to try to hopefully avoid the feeling that we get when we have to play Eureka Temp for 4 rounds, which means it could be kind of fun at the beginning, fun at the end, but boring all throughout the middle. I think they're going to have to make some adjustments at Ivy Hills to, number one, they got to fix hole 14. Figure it out. Make it an island, stroke and distance. It's either you land it on or you're not, and that's it. That's what it should be. I think they got to fix hole 6. make that more manageable, or not more manageable, but they have to make that a better hole with better score distribution. And they have to just learn their lessons. Another big lesson they have to learn is, they had the AmSide event this year. It's something they're going to be doing every year now. They did not set it up very well for a lot of amateurs to go spectate. Now, I don't say that as an amateur who was like, I need to go see all the pros. How dare they keep me from doing that? I don't care. My feelings on that are indifferent. However, when you look at big events like Ledgestone and D-Glow, where they very successfully set it up so that amateurs can go spectate. Now, I know that it's also later in the year, so daylight is a bit of an issue. But when you look at all the details, they had a lot of like their disc drops and stuff a lot earlier in the day than normal. And it just made it impossible for AMs to really participate. And I think they need to shuffle it up. Maybe put some of the AMs who don't play as well into easier courses. Part of the reason why, like my group, I played pretty well. And so I was in the top 4 or 5 groups playing in my division. And so I teed off every day between 1:30 and 1:40. And unfortunately, our rounds took 5 to 6 hours. I waited on hole 18 at New London. From the moment I got to hole 18 to the moment I tapped out my par, it was over an hour and 15 minutes. Had the divisions been cleaned up and certain maybe ratings caps been put in place, certain divisions not being allowed to play the harder courses, we probably would have finished enough time to go over and spectate some of the final rounds, but we weren't able to do that. So I think they need to learn a few lessons about that. I think they can have a great combo event and turn this into a real incredible thing. Maybe add some time between USDGC and the Pro Tour Championship to allow people to get some extra practice in. I don't know how that's going to work. But I think the blueprints are here for this to be a really great place to come to in the future. I hate that we're splitting it up next year, but I think that Lynchburg is going to be a location on the Pro Tour for years to come with a combination of both Ivy Hill and New London. But hey, that does it for our last episode of the main season. We still have the match play event coming up here in a couple weeks, which we will go through. I think it'll be entertaining to watch, and there's some things we want to talk about related to that. But for the main season, we're done, and this has been the first full touring season of Understable Discourse that we've gotten through. I appreciate each and every one of you for listening, for tuning in weekly, for subscribing. It means a lot to me. And we're going to keep growing this thing. Eventually, you're not going to see diaper boxes in the back behind me. You're going to see video of different holes. I spent some time this past week with Paul Ulibarri talking about disc golf media. And I have a lot of great ideas that we're going to put into this to make this even better. And I have some people who want to come on the show and want to talk about their experiences on tour, and we're going to do that. We're going to have a good time with that. But as for me and this episode, that's about it. Let me know what you thought of the Pro Tour Championship in the comments down below. Did you come out at all? Which of the courses do you like better, Ivy Hill or New London, from a spectator's perspective? And also let me know in the comments, did Goose hit the rock? Let me know down there. And while you're there, if you could give a like to the video and subscribe, that would be great. It's the best way you can support the growth of this channel. And until next time, make sure you go play some disc golf, watch some disc golf. I'll catch you later.